Good afternoon and welcome to this virtual info day for the call for proposals that we published on the 29th of February concerning the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Facility. We are dedicating the afternoon to this call for proposals, to your questions. As usual, we will start with a reviewing the policy context of the call and also having a focus on the cooperation we have with implementing partners and financial institutions, as it is one of the specificity, of course, of the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Facility. And then we will review more in details for each transport mode, what is the scope, what is eligible, what are the modalities. And then in a second part of the afternoon, we will go more into the technicalities on how to introduce your applications, what are the best tips we can provide you to be sure that you enter a successful application. So before handing over to my colleague from the Directorate General for Mobility and Transport for the policy context, I will now turn to my colleague, Richard Ferrer, who will say a few words on practically how you can still introduce your questions, and then we'll go through the policy context. Richard.
Yes, good afternoon. So you see on your screen the agenda of the day. We will explain to you what's behind AFIF, this new set of AFIF. What can be financed, because we see that compared to the previous session, the previous AFIF, there are some slight differences, and how you can apply and hopefully be successful. So for the moment, you can see the Slido QR code. So I invite you to use your phone and scan it. You will be able to raise some questions. During the event, we will take a bunch of questions after each mode to make it easier, and then there will be a larger Q&A session at the very end where we will be able to take some additional questions if any. Okay. So let's go maybe to the policy context.
Yes, next slide, please. So as you can see, the EU policy objectives and what the Connecting Europe facility will contribute to. So first of all is, of course, the Green Deal. I'm sure everybody has heard about it already. It's the EU growth strategy, basically, to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And in order to do so, for transport, that means a 90% reduction in transport emissions by 2050. And one of the measures that is mentioned in this policy document is the acceleration of the shift to sustainable and smart mobility. And this includes, of course, the production and the deployment of alternative fuels infrastructure. Now, in the Green Deal, there's also a specific target mentioned in this context, which is 1 million public recharging and refueling stations for about 30 million zero and low emission vehicles that are expected on the European roads by 2025, which is basically around the corner. Now, in terms of transport, very specifically, the basis for the green and the digital transition of the European transport system is our sustainable and smart mobility strategy. And also here, we have very specific targets linking to 2030, 2040, and 2050, and they deal with zero-emission cars, zero-emission vessels, and zero-emission aircraft. And basically, by 2050, we want nearly all cars, vans, buses, as well as new HGVs to be zero-emission. Now, to put all of this into reality, there is the Fit for 55 package of the EU, which contains legislative initiatives that deal also with transport, of course. You can see the three most important ones for us here today, the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation, the Fuel EU Maritime Initiative, and the Refuel EU Aviation Initiative. But you will hear more about them later when we go into the respective transport modes. And of course, as always, the Connecting Europe facility is there to contribute to the equipment and the completion of the Trans-European Transport Network. So this was all for the policy context, and we can go to the next slide. I will say a couple of words on the cooperation with financial institutions. So as you have already heard, and you probably know, the AFIF is a blending facility. That means when you apply for a grant, you need a complementary financing from a financing institution. Now, this call represents 1 billion euros that are divided into general and cohesion envelope. And this money, to access this money, you need to come with the financing from a financing institution, which can either be an implementing partner. Now, these are certain national promotional banks who have signed an administrative agreement with DG Move, but you can also finance your project with any other public or private financing institution that is established in the EU. We call them non-implementing partners. And the budget that we have available is divided into 2/3 and 1/3, as you can see here. So 2/3 are set aside for projects that come with an implementing partner, and 1/3 of the budget is preserved for projects that come with any other public or private financing institution. Now, this, let's say, it is an estimate in the sense that we would like this division to be like that, but of course, in the end, we will try and be supportive to any project that successfully passes the evaluation phase.
Yes, and I think it's important in your application process to take into account the approval that you need to get from the implementing partners, I mean EIB, EBRD, or any other national promotional banks, or from the commercial bank you're working with. As you can see on the right side of this slide, once you have discussed with your financing partner, you need to get an approval which will materialize in your application in the financial approval letter, which is a compulsory element by which we have the certainty that the financial institution has performed a comprehensive risk-based analysis of your project and has committed to provide the financing. So this has to be done before you apply because it's part of the application. And as you can see, you will have up to 12 months after the cutoff date, each cutoff date, up to 12 months to sign the financing agreement with this implementing partner or commercial bank.
Now, we had an AFIF before. There was the AFIF 2021-2023, and already there we had implementing partners, and you can see the list of them here. We are now in the process of signing implementing partners for this current AFIF call, and the list will be updated regularly on the Funding and Tenders portal, so please check it. But for you to get an idea, this is the list that we had for the last call.
So let's start to see a bit what could be financed under the Alternative Fuel Facility. First of all, a glance at what has been done already to implement the policy which has been presented to you. You see that with the previous AFIF call, 1.3 billion euro have been dedicated to more than 130 projects, mostly covering electricity and hydrogen supply. You see the numbers, you see that it's quite important in terms of recharging points, in terms of refueling stations for the entire the 27 member states. You see that we are still expecting more projects in the maritime and inland waterway sector, which were less present in the applications. And you can see as well for hydrogen that we can still, we come back on that, we can still finance a bit of production. You see that electrolyzers have been financed in the past, always combined with hydrogen refilling stations. But it gives you a good overview of what could be, what has been successful in the past and what could be successful in the new call. Next. You see here the AFIF core priorities. Everything is about zero emission transport. First, as usual, we have a topic which is relating to electricity recharging infrastructure under the unit contribution. We will come back to that as well. Electricity and hydrogen infrastructure based on the usual co-funding rate, so a percentage of grants based on your total budget. And this is brand new in this new call, ammonia and methanol infrastructure, supply infrastructure, may find financing as well, may be financed under this call. So let's start with road transport and having a glance at the policy context for road transport and what frame our support with AFIF. With Alexandra Klinker. Welcome.
Hello. So I'm working for the DigiMo policy unit in charge of sustainable and smart and intelligent transport. And I would like to tell you what has happened in the political context of road transport since the last AFIF call. So we had in 2023 adopted the regulation which strengthened the CO2 emission standard requirements for cars and vans, so for light-duty vehicles. It means that there will be like strengthened targets from 2030, and from 2035 it's simply all new cars will need to be zero emission. So this is this will have enormous impact on the development of electromobility for light-duty vehicles, which are already quite well on the way. However, we have also February this year the political agreement on the revision of the regulation on CO2 emission standards for heavy-duty vehicles, and this part of the electromobility sector has been less developed. And with this legislation and the development of the markets, we can see that there will be more developments here, more projects, and all this strengthens emission reduction targets need to be balanced by the enough rollout of alternative fuels infrastructure in the road transport. One part has been done. Thanks also to the AFIF 1 project. But in the meantime, we had also the formal adoption in 2023 of alternative fuels infrastructure regulation. And this regulation is giving the mandatory targets for member states for development of recharging infrastructure both for light duty and heavy duty vehicles. And this will happen. It is linked to the fleet. It is linked to the distance on the TNT networks. It is linked also to location, for example, in the urban nodes on safe and secure parking. So this means that it will result with a more structured response from the member states. And we also hope that this AFIF 2 will help to member states to meet these targets. May I ask for the next? And just to explain you a little bit where we are with, may I ask for so alternative fuels infrastructure regulation, it concerns publicly accessible recharging, just to make like a picture for you, and it can be in public domain, but it can be also in private premises, for example, in private parking places or supermarkets. if it is available to all public. And then all the recharging points which concern recharging at home and office, it is defined by energy performance of building directive. May I ask for the next slide? And finally, I would like just to give you as an example, because we cannot here take too much time on the AFIF, but this is an example of targets for heavy-duty vehicles for recharging points. So you can see that, for example, by 2027, 50% of network, both TNT core and TNT comprehensive, need to have every 120 kilometers pools of recharging station with a defined capacity in terms of kilowatts, and then it changes till 2030, also with a difference of distance. So this concerns distance-based targets. And maybe just to finalize the reference to AFIF, AFIF is really very much based on this legislation, also in the sense that in AFIF there are requirements in terms of user-friendly, consumer user-friendly, quality, technical requirements, standards, and AFIF is based on this, and applicants will need to respect these requirements of this legislation. So I refer you to look at this more carefully. Thank you very much.
So now you saw the context. Let's see what AFIF can finance in this context. First of all, everything which is relating to the energy efficiency of building. This is about private charging, so this is completely out of AFIF. What we will focus on is really the recharging points that are fully open 24/7 for public access. So you see here three possibilities. I mean, two types of recharging points, and I'm really talking about recharging points, meaning the capacity to charge one vehicle at a time. What matters really is the location. So if you intend to deploy a set of recharging points for light-duty vehicles, LDVs, at 150 kilowatt minimum, this can be done on the TEN-T network, and we have a margin, like in AFIR, of up to 3 kilometers from the TEN-T network in terms of driving distance. Then we can subsidize as well the deployment of recharging points for heavy-duty vehicles, HDVs. And here we have two possibilities. The first is to have recharging points at minimum 350 kilowatts, and this can be located either on the TEN-T network, still with a margin of 3 kilometers driving distance, or in urban nodes, or in safe and secure parking. What is as well possible is to finance recharging points at a lower power output capacity, 150 kilowatt for heavy-duty vehicles, and this is only in safe and secure parking. So you see here the possibilities of financing with, if we can just come back, with unit contribution. So it's based on unit contribution, this type of infrastructure. Now, based on a support rate, this is the novelty of this call for electromobility, is the possibility to, for the first time, finance MCS, so 1 megawatt charger and charging points for heavy-duty vehicles. This can be deployed on the 3 different locations I mentioned before, so on the TEN-T network, and still with 3 kilometer driving distance buffer. You can deploy this in safe and secure parking or in urban nodes. What can be done in addition is that, of course, you may be willing to deploy an infrastructure which includes 1 megawatt charger, but includes as well other type of chargers for different needs, meaning chargers for heavy-duty vehicles at 150 or 350 kilowatts minimum. So this is possible, but it's always in conjunction with the installation of at least 1 megawatt charger. Specific conditions apply, so you need to look into the context, of course. So this was about electromobility. Now, about support rate for road transport, we are still financing hydrogen refueling stations for light-duty and heavy-duty vehicles, which means primarily hydrogen stations operating with a supply at 700 bar, but it may be 700 and 350. It has to be in open access, and what we ask for is to have only stations supplying 1 ton of hydrogen per day. This is the minimum requirements. I know that in AFIF it's a bit more detailed, but for the application under AFIF, under this call, 1 ton is the minimum which is requested. And this, again, applies in terms of location to any places on the TEN-T network, with a difference of plus minus 10 kilometers, I mean, actually up to 10 kilometers, and urban nodes as well may be considered. We still finance alternative fuels for public transport. Contrary to the past, we are not anymore financing electrification of bus depot, but we still finance the installation of hydrogen supply in a bus depot. So for public transport, again, 700 bar or 300 dual pressure, 350 and 700 bar, only in urban nodes. So it is mentioned as listed in the TEN-T regulation. Take into consideration that it's listed in the applicable TEN-T regulation at the time you will apply. And as the first cut-off date you will see is by this autumn, September. It means that most probably we hope the new TEN-T regulation to be enforced by that time, which means that the full list of new urban nodes defined in the new TEN-T regulation will be applicable at the moment you apply. Next slide. And so maybe we can take for the road section some Q&A. We have received some questions already. So we will display. If you still have questions that were not sent before, feel free to send it, and we'll see at the end if we can take it, if not too many questions, of course. So you will see the questions, I guess, now. So we have a questions on the grid connection. To know if grid connection is eligible in projects that could be financed with the unit contribution. So the answer is no. We are not anymore financing grid connection with unit contribution. So it's really about the recharging points, either for light duty or heavy duty vehicles. So under unit contribution, no more support for grid connection. Are you planning to update the eligibility map? And if yes, when? We'll come back to this a bit later. Yeah. 350 kilowatt and less than 1 megawatt. 30% of eligible cost, we'll come back to the percentage later, and no more than, this means that no matter what count will... Okay, there is a question. Sorry for the side talks. There is a question about the amount, so I will come back on to the amount for unit contributions and for support rate, so that you can see exactly how much you can expect based on the number of charging points. And a last question, I guess, which is about the support provided for passenger electricity recharging for passenger cars. So yes, there is a support for that because, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are financing charging points at 150 kilowatt for light-duty vehicles, and light-duty includes potentially passenger cars. So it's passenger cars, it's vans. So it's according to the definition, actually, the legislative definition of heavy duty and light duty with the categories M and N. And I think that's about the questions for the moment. So maybe we can go to the next point, which is about maritime and inland waterway. Okay, so we welcome our colleague from DG Move, and just to reply to the previous question on the update of eligibility map, because for unique contribution there is an eligibility map. So the update will be done at each cutoff. So we have 3 cutoffs for this call, and at each cutoff, based on what we have selected previously, the update will be done. This will apply actually mainly for 150 kilowatt charging points. As you can see on the eligibility map, for 350, the entire network is eligible. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First to the colleagues in the agency for organizing this info day on AFIF, and also to all those on the virtual audience for being here, and also for taking this meeting. In particular on the maritime related angle of AFIF and its corresponding fuel EU regulation. These are important pieces of the Fit for 55 legislation that work together, and consistency and coherence between the two is very important for implementation. In particular in AFIR, the requirements for member states to have in place in ports the offer for shoreside electricity is in the regulation drafted in Article 9, applicable to container ships and passenger ships above 5,000 gross tons, in covering above up to 90% of the port calls in each port. It applies to the 20 ports that meet specific thresholds for the different ship types, of 100 port calls for container ships, 40 port calls for RoPax ferries, and 25 port calls for cruise ships. If the threshold is not met, the requirement does not apply. There are some exemptions, such as port calls under 2 hours, short port calls, or use of zero-emission technologies and unscheduled port calls due to safety or emergency situations. And also some exemptions in respect to islands and outermost regions in the EU. The requirement for development of shoreside electricity in inland ports in particular is also indicated, together with the refueling infrastructure that is also in AFIR. And here, in terms of refueling infrastructure, you will see the targets for supply of liquefied methane in maritime ports, which come directly already from the AFID, and now here in Article 10 also included in the regulation. Next slide, please. One important element of AFIR is the national policy framework, where different aspects for the implementation of the regulation in respect to maritime transport are included. And here, national targets for deployment of alternative fuel infrastructure in ports are to be included, namely with respect to liquefied methane refueling infrastructure and shoreside electricity. But also aspects focused on the development of infrastructure for supply of hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, or electricity. Here seen as an expansion of the requirement for liquefied methane refueling infrastructure, and taking the national policy framework as an opportunity for member states to specify also objectives for deployment of additional alternative fuels important for maritime transport. And here, the final national policy frameworks to be in place on the 31st of December 2025. Next slide, please. In FuelEU in particular, and now going to the ship side, to the demand side that will push for the deployment of the infrastructure. We have, in specific for the requirement for reduction of greenhouse gas intensity of the energy used on board, we have a direct call for ships to further increasingly reduce the greenhouse gas intensity by using renewable and low-carbon fuels. And to be able to supply these renewable and low-carbon fuels, specifically for low-carbon fuels such as methanol, ammonia, hydrogen, specific infrastructure is required for refueling. And here the push from FuelEU directly into the demand for adequate infrastructure for bunkering. The scope of FuelEU is based on a well-to-wake life cycle assessment. This makes an immediate call, of course, for fuels which are able to be produced and certified, demonstrated on a sustainable, certified way. It's based on a technology-neutral approach, so it does not prescribe any specific fuel for any specific ship type. And this poses, of course, a challenge because some segments in shipping will go for one type of fuel, other segments for a different type or even electrification. It has the same scope as MRV, applicable to all ships above 5,000 gross tons. FuelEU Maritime includes, however, a specific regulation within a regulation, which is in Article 6, specifically targeted for mitigation of air pollution of direct emissions at berth. Obligations for container ships and passenger ships above 5,000 gross tons to connect to onshore power supply in AFIF ports as from 1st of January 2030. So from 1st of January 2030, all large container ships and passenger ships, including RoPax and cruise ships, will need to connect to OPS in AFIF ports. AFIF ports, as defined in previous slide, ports that meet the threshold for deployment of shoreside electricity infrastructure. The same obligation will be in place for non-AFIF ports if they have the capacity from 1st of January 2035. This means that even if your port is not meeting the threshold, but nonetheless decides to develop shoreside electricity because of reasons of air pollution mitigation, because of reasons of port electrification efficiency, it will be possible through FuelEU to ensure a fixed demand in those ports from ships covered in Article 6 of FuelEU, large container ships, passenger ships, including RoPax and cruise ships. An important element in Article 6 of FuelEU is that zero-emission technologies can be an alternative to onshore power supply. So ships using battery groups, hydrogen fuel cells, they will be able to claim exemption or exception to use or connect to OPS. Next slide.
Okay, so let's see how we can support the operators to meet those targets and those requirements. As you can see here already, AFIF is covering electricity and hydrogen supply. So for electricity, OPS is of course one of the targets. Recharging stations for port services may be financed as well. I mean, we're not talking only about the vessels, but as well about the electrification and decarbonization of port services. We just mentioned possibility for alternatives for vessels. So battery charging systems is as well in the scope of AFIF. And of course, the related grid connection, which may be an important cost, of course, for this type of infrastructure. In particular, if we talk about large vessels, large container ships, or even cruise, because we can as well support electrification for any type of vessels calling at a port. Hydrogen, basically hydrogen refilling stations. We have no specific requirements regarding the capacity of the
the technical specificities of the stations compared to road. It has to fit the needs, of course, but this type of infrastructure is eligible. What comes for both type of fuel is that we can finance as well vessels and port equipment that are switching to a propulsion system which is more friendly, so using alternative fuels. And this includes as well transshipment equipment. So here we're talking about gantry cranes, about ridge takers, all the elements of forklifts, but all elements that could be dedicated to moving containers in particular, so for transshipment purposes. This can take place, as usual, in all 20 inland waterway and maritime ports, so for electricity and hydrogen. But the novelty this year, as I mentioned initially, is the fact that ammonia supply and methanol supply are both eligible now under AFIF. What could be eligible? You can see it for ammonia or for methanol. It's basically refueling stations, but as well mobile refueling stations, if I may say so, which means bunkering vessels, for which we have a limit to which is set at 10,000 cubic meters. The reason being that what we want to finance is a medium-sized bunkering vessel which can fit most of the needs. In particular, at the start, when we are still expecting ammonia and methanol propelled vessels to come to the market to a larger extent, and what we do not want to finance is the transport of ammonia or methanol. It's really for bunkering purposes. Vessels and port equipment here are as well eligible, provided that we change the propulsion system. And again, this is in terms of location eligible in all inland waterway and maritime port areas. So maybe we have some questions already for the maritime sector that we could take. So one question which is relating to K cranes, electric rubber-tired gantry cranes, electric ridge stackers, electric forklifts, electric terminal tractors. Can we consider this eligible? The answer is yes, as long as all those equipment are used for the purpose of transshipment of containers, transshipments of cargo. So this is definitely eligible, again, in terms of changing the propulsion system. And as usual, we take only the difference of cost between standard equipment based on fossil fuel, running on fossil fuel, and the equipment running on hydrogen, electricity, or other type of alternative fuels. Other questions? Does this funding call cover the installation of charging points for electric terminal equipment, such as tractors, ridge takers, forklifts? Again, we can electrify port activities, port operation. So definitely this is amongst the infrastructure that can be financed. And I see a third question arriving, which is, could one apply support solely for the electric ammonia methanol fuel vessel without applying for the recharging refueling infrastructure? The answer is no. The support which may be given to vessels and to port equipment can only be in addition to the installation, to the deployment of alternative fuel infrastructure, supply infrastructure. So this is pretty clear, as it was in the previous AFIF call. So we can go to the next subject. And thanks, Ricardo.
Thank you very much.
And we can welcome our colleague Rafal from the aviation unit to give us an insight on the policy context for supporting AFIF projects.
Thank you very much. So basically, the policy context is set very clearly in the sustainable and smart mobility strategy, where there is a flagship focusing on zero-emission airports, among other things. And there, the main goals are, first of all, to ensure that stationary aircraft at airports are fed with renewable power, meaning electricity, instead of running their engines to supply various services once they are on the ground. Then another focus is on greening all the ground movements at airports, because there is a wide variety of different airside vehicles and equipment running on fossil fuels, and the idea is to green those vehicles and equipment and make them run on electricity. And then, of course, in view of deploying sustainable aviation fuels, the focus should be on deploying them and focusing on renewable and low carbon fuels. And then finally, more long term, the idea is to incentivize the deployment of zero emission aircraft. And what we are doing as the Commission is we have set a regulatory framework to implement this vision, those goals, and this is regulatory framework for the member states to implement various actions, but also for the EU level to deploy different support mechanisms. And the most important mechanism for transport is obviously Connecting Europe Facility. And the first instrument is the revised TEN-T guidelines, which are now at the final stages of adoption and are expected to enter into force sometime before summer. And there is a clear requirement for member states to ensure different facilities to make sure that stationary aircraft can use preconditioned air instead of, again, running their own engines. And then within the alternative fuels infrastructure regulation, which was adopted last year, we have various requirements for airports to make sure that stationary aircraft can use electricity. And once again, we are avoiding the use of fossil fuels. Those two regulations have very specific targets for member states and the airports. And that's why the community, the industry will have to follow suit and implement those solutions. And finally, I want to mention a support initiative that the Commission launched together with the industry. It's a public-private partnership called Alliance for Zero Emission Aviation, where various actors sit together and discuss the best ways to prepare the market entry of zero emission aviation, electric aircraft, hydrogen aircraft, and very importantly also there are very detailed discussion how to prepare infrastructure, aviation infrastructure and airports for the entry of these new types of aircraft. Thank you very much.
So again, how can we support with AFIF this objective? As you can see, we support clearly the electrification of air ground services, air ground operations, which means whatever type of equipment, of vehicle that is needed to supply fuel, to supply to carry passengers, to bring the luggages, you name it, all the services on the air side. We support the electrification. The novelty this time is that we can support as well the switch from fossil fuel to hydrogen, and not only anymore the electrification. This is for ground operations, but of course we support as well the electrification and hydrogen supply to stationary aircraft and airships, if any. So this is clearly to provide electricity, to provide air conditioning to all the system that can be used on the air side. This is clearly eligible under AFIF. So the novelty this year is really that we start to finance not only electricity, not only electrification, but as well the use of hydrogen, which may be to fuel cells, for example, but the use of hydrogen in airports. Next slide. And of course, in the list of airports that here it's mentioned Annex 2 of the TEN-T regulation, which is the existing one. But again, it will be the applicable list at the moment the new TEN-T regulation will be in force. We may have some questions. Only one? Okay. Let's see. 2. Can you give an example of which projects at the airport could be financed? Well, basically, I think we have more or less 60 airports now that are benefiting from support for electrification of services. To name a few, we have most of the Spanish airports that are 35 airports, I think, in Spain at the moment benefiting from this, both for air conditioning, electricity supply, for aircraft, stationary aircraft. We have big airports like Charles de Gaulle in Paris and Orly that have started the electrification of their airside services as well. We have airports in the Baltic countries. We have, airports a bit more and more in most of the member states. So this is the type, basically, of projects that we can supply at the moment in the various airports. When we talk about electrification, are we talking about green electricity? Will AFIF require electricity with renewable guarantees of origin? So what we are financing here is the supply. So it's the infrastructure, the supply infrastructure. We have no specific requirements on the origin of the electricity. But of course, if in your application you can demonstrate that the source of electricity is green, is renewable, it's clearly an element which will be considered. But there is no requirement per se. It's not a selection criteria, let's say. At the moment, we really focus on the infrastructure, the supply infrastructure itself. And I see a last question. Can our AFIF core proposal include different applications in different sectors, road transport, marine, airports? Well, it's more a general question, not directly linked to aviation, actually. But, well, yes, in practice, yes. The only limit, we have 2 limits. The first limit is you cannot combine unit contribution projects and projects supported by a support rate. There's 2 different applications, clearly. But if you have a global project which includes different mode of transport submitted under the support rate topic, then there is no problem for that. Second limit is that you have 2 calls, one call for the general call, and the cohesion call for the cohesion countries. So this you cannot mix. Of course, if you have projects both on cohesion countries and under the general envelope, you can present them as twin projects, and you make a cross-reference so that we can see that indeed it's a one and only project that is financed through the 2 different calls. Is there any other one? Yeah. Sorry, not that many technical questions. Yes. Our investment in electric charging infrastructure aimed at charging electric aircraft also eligible under this topic? Yes, I think in practice it's indeed something that can be considered. The idea is really to provide electricity to stationary aircraft, so it could be to fuel, let's say, aircraft. Of course, keep in mind the location because it has to be in an airport, which is a TEN-T airport. And it may be unlikely that this type of aircraft at the moment are operated in TEN-T airports, but maybe, why not? In any case, by nature, it's indeed eligible. And I think that's about it for aviation at the moment. Yes? Only one, which is arriving. On synergetic elements eligible for airports, I mean, for all modes of transport, basically, we may have a synergetic element. Synergetic meaning mostly the production side. So you may have solar panels, for example. So this is one of the elements which could be considered as synergetic. We will come back to what can be a synergetic element. But yes, for all modes of transport, basically, a synergetic element can be added. But I will come back on the specificities. That's it? Yes, so let's go for the next. Thanks, Rafael.
Thank you.
And we welcome again Sarah for rail transport.
Thank you, and I can keep it very brief. So for rail transport, of course, there is the electrification requirement, but there can be an exemption. So as you can see in Article 12 of the TEN-T regulation, it says that it needs to be fully electrified regarding line tracks and to the extent necessary also for electric train operations as regards sidings. But in paragraph 3, there is the exemption that at the request of a member state and in duly justified cases, an exemption shall be granted by the Commission in respect of requirements that go beyond the requirements of Directive 2008/57 concerning ERTMS and electrification. So in order here to apply for hydrogen under the AFIF, in terms of rail transport, a exemption has to be requested. This has to be done by the national administration, and it has to be sent to the European Commission. Your national contact points will know who to contact in these cases, and then an official exemption needs to be granted by the Commission in order to apply to the AFIF for hydrogen in rail transport. And this leads to the next slide.
Yes, so as you can see, the possibilities are rather limited because it's really very specific cases applicable to the railway sector. But what can we finance? So basically, we can finance hydrogen refueling stations to supply the railway transport. What matters really is the locations. So we just mentioned the non-electrified network sections with a possibility of derogation. So this is a possibility in terms of location. Second possibility is the terminals. All the terminals for shunting locomotives. We had questions in the past regarding this point because you can install an hydrogen refueling station in a terminal for shunting locomotives, but of course you can use it for fueling railway transport in general. The primary use is and location is there, but it's not limited in terms of use, of course, when it's deployed. And the third location is indeed in isolated network. So again, very limited possibilities, but still a possibility if you have a very good reason to ask for a derogation, duly justified, and to see if this can fit with the railway network that we intend to decarbonize, let's say, through this possibility under AFIF. Is there any question on rail? No? Okay. I think we have concluded on the various modes of transport. Is there any pending question on the modes of transport that we could take, maybe? because you are quite numerous online. I mean, more than 1,000 participants. And of course, we cannot take all the questions at the moment. So there is a question on LNG. Can we consider LNG refueling facilities eligible? Actually, no. In the previous AFIF call, we have kept LNG for the maritime sector and inland waterway sector as a transition. It's still probably a transition for operators, but we have stopped the financing, so it's not any more eligible under this new AFIF call. Second question, when we are speaking about hydrogen supply, are we speaking about production as well? So for hydrogen, again, AFIF is here to finance the supply infrastructure, but we have the possibility to support a bit of production, and this is what we call the synergetic element. So production, for example, typically for hydrogen, it will be an electrolyzer based on producing green hydrogen, producing renewable hydrogen. So this is clearly a type of synergetic element that can go with a supply infrastructure. It cannot go alone. We don't finance electrolyzers alone. It has to be in addition to a supply project. Other questions? Can the AFIF call support the deployment of charging infrastructure for trucks on private grounds, like at depot, where most use cases are deployed? So we know well that, of course, when you have a transport company which has switched to an electric fleet, it may be very, very relevant to have either electricity on site in the premises of the company, or even an hydrogen station dedicated to the company or a group of companies. This is not the scope, definitely, of AFIF. The AFIF is really, again, for public use infrastructure. So we cannot finance any infrastructure, supply infrastructure, that could be for the exclusive use of a company or a group of companies. And I think that's about the pending questions. Yes. So we can go to the next point, and the co-financing principles. So here, and this is what you probably are expecting since the beginning, is how much money finally I can get. And we had a question initially on that. So you see, it's for unit contribution, it's exactly the same type of support than in the previous AFIF call. So minimum 150 kilowatts, you see how much you can get under general and cohesion, so 20,000 to 30,000. Minimum 350 kilowatts for heavy-duty vehicles. Then you can get 40,000 up to 60,000 for the cohesion member states. In the deployment in the Cohesion member states. You see the link here for the eligibility map. I mean, on the public Temtech public viewer, you can find all the information. You can zoom on the exact locations that may be of interest for you in terms of eligibility, and you can find the eligibility map, which gives you a broad understanding of possible locations, of possible eligible sections. Two maps that are available and that you can see as well from the public viewer by selecting the appropriate box in the legend.
Just to clarify, one map with 150 kilowatt for light-duty vehicles, and one map concerning 350 kilowatt for heavy-duty vehicles.
Yes,
these are the two maps.
And of course, as you can see, because we are on the second call for AFIF, the map for 150, the eligible sections have been reduced to a quite large extent because you were very active in the first call, and many beneficiaries have deployed larger or will deploy a large network for high power recharging points. So this is about unit contribution. Again, no synergetic element for unit contribution. It's really one charging point, one-way charging point, one time 20,000 or 40,000 or 30,000. I mean, you see the possibilities, unit contribution. So 1, you get 20,000, 2, you get 40,000, 3, you get 60,000. Very easy, but it's supposed to cover all the costs you may have, at least for the installation of a recharging point. But there is no additional cost taken into account. There is no grid connection taken into account. You want to install a canopy, a very fancy canopy, that's good, but the unit contribution remains exactly the same. It depends really on the number of recharging points that you will deploy. Regarding the support rate, so all the elements that we have seen just before, as you can see, support rate for electrification at 1 megawatt, the MCS, for hydrogen supply, for ammonia supply, for methanol supply, whatever the mode of transport, you get 30% of your budget in terms of CEF support for the general envelope. And for the cohesion envelope, it's up to 50% that can be allocated. So half of your budget can be taken into account. Maybe worth noticing that for the first time, for outermost regions, the support rate can be raised up to 70% of your budget. So it has to be noticed, development in outermost regions, like it was the case under the standard Connecting Europe Facility program, what it is, the same way it is supported under the connection, the CEF program, it is now possible under this AFIF call. Next slide. We talked a lot about synergetic elements. So this is in a nutshell what it is about. Basically, it's to add a bit of support, a bit the production in combination and always in combination with the deployment of a supply network. So it may concern on-site electricity production by renewable energy sources, which may be solar panel, for example. It may be electrolyzers for hydrogen production, and again, renewable hydrogen production. Any elements you can provide on the sustainable use of water for the production of hydrogen will be very welcome as well. On-site electricity storage is an element that can be financed, and typically for the grid connection, we can take this as well as a synergetic element. For this, we may have different rules applicable depending on the transport mode. So you have specific conditions that you need to check in the context because we are not financing always in the same way. We are not considering always grid connection as a synergetic element, maybe part of the full budget. So have a look depending on your type of project. What matters when you submit an application with a synergetic element, first it has to be but we will see that in a separate work package. But the most important point is that it can reach up to 20% of your total project budget, and no more, not more than that. So keep this in mind when you apply. It can be less, of course, but it cannot be more than 20%.
Exactly, and just to clarify here, it cannot be more than 20% of the eligible. We speak always about the eligible cost of the project costs.
Yes, which is really the cost that is the one of the project for which you apply for financing, which is the cost that you have in your financial approval letter, which has been which receives a co-financing. Financing from a financial institution. Next. If you want to have a very quick glance, not on this slide, of course, but you will have this available online, so you will be able to zoom because it's not meant to be very clear on this slide, of course. But basically, you have a matrix which summarize the call text in a very visual way, where you can see by type of fuel, by modes of transport, by location, by topic for the call, what can be financed and at which level. level. And you can see as well what are the associated costs, associated eligible costs that can be part of an application in addition to the supply infrastructure. And I'm talking here possibly of a grid connection, of a battery storage system or charging system, of zero emission transshipment equipment, or additional elements, vessels, etc., that you can be financed in a global application. And you find as well some columns that are describing the synergetic element and to which type of project it may apply. So in a nutshell, really, very quickly, you can see at a first glance what could be the potential eligibility of your project. And then, of course, you need to go and see the details in the call text. Next slide. Last but not least, the timetable and the deadlines. I mean, we have 3 cutoff. We used to have 5 in the previous call, but it was on over a longer period. This time, we talk about a call 24-25 with 3 cutoffs. So first cutoff, 24th of September this year, and 2 cutoffs in 2025 on the 11th of June and on the 17th of December. You see when you can get the information on the result, when you can get a possible signature. So you have a time slot which is indicated, which gives you a bit the information. For those of you who applied under the previous call, in particular in the cutoff 5 of AFIF, just to mention that because you may be eagerly waiting for the results of the selection, and we are on the 8th, and no later than on the 11th, 12th of April, you will receive the confirmation of the selection of your project. So it's still in time for you to see if you need to maybe reapply on the 24th of September for the those not selected, or if you have a second phase, you see when you can send your new applications. Maybe one element that has to be taken into account in your planning is that the contacts you have with the financial institutions allows you to apply with a financial approval letter, which has to be validated by the bank, so implementing partner or commercial bank. But what is crucial is that you have to be able to sign really the financing agreement with your financial partner up to 12 months maximum after the cutoff date. We will sign the grant agreement in the meantime. Previously, we were waiting for that, which has put quite a lot of pressure in some cases on you to finalize the agreement with a financial partner before signing the grant agreement. So this has been changed and it's more flexible now, but still you need to finalize this at least within the 12 months after the cutoff date. Last point, the project duration, it has changed as well. It used to be 36, it's 39 months. Not a big extension, but still 39 months is the maximum duration of a project. So for unit contribution project, this will not be changed at all. It's 39 months full stop and no extension is possible. So take really seriously this into account because projects we are selecting have to be very mature and no extension will be possible. But for projects supported under the support rate, standard support rate, there is always, of course, a possibility to extend a project in case of issues that were not planned, not foreseen. As long as it's duly justified, we still have this possibility as for what happened in AFIF, in the first AFIF call. Next slide. And I see that we have no questions pending, no? Maybe some. We can get some, and I would suggest that we make maybe a short break of 5 minutes after some questions before entering into the details of the application process. But first, let's take some questions. Is there a threshold for hydrogen production sites in terms of cost? No. I mean, we have not defined a threshold in terms of budget, in terms of cost. what is defined is a threshold in terms of supply capacity, and of course this goes with a cost. So the minimum is 1 ton supply per day for an hydrogen supply station. Here for hydrogen production site, it's slightly different, the question. There is no threshold as well, but again, an hydrogen production site is considered as a synergetic element, and then the synergetic element will represent only 20% of the total budget. So by definition, the threshold applicable is the limit in the budget of 20%. Other questions, is it correct that for hydrogen, the synergetic element is not valid for renewable electricity generation, but only for electrolyzers? Alors, not sure completely got the answer, but the question. But basically, what we expect to have for an electrolyzer, again, is to have the production of renewable hydrogen. So renewable in the sense of the RED regulation. So renewable electricity generation, by definition, it has to be renewable hydrogen. Then, to which extent the hydrogen is used then to produce electricity, this is something else. This is not something we are dealing with. Not sure I replied completely to the question, but this is the way we consider projects and synergetic elements. No other questions? Okay. So maybe I suggest that we make a 5-minute break, and so we resume at a 3:45. So stay online.
So good afternoon. With the next presentation, I will try to guide you through the application process in migrants and also give you some tips on how to submit a complete application. So in this next slide, what you see is the Funding Attendance Opportunity Portal. This is the portal where all the information of the AFIF calls is published. How to find our calls? What you need to do is to tick on the Find Call to Proposals that is highlighted in red, and you will land in the next website. There, in this new page, you will be able to search more in detail for a call for proposals. Important to remind, the information that is given in this website is given by topics and not anymore by call for proposals. In this specific case, I have indicated in the quick search tab the word alternative, and also as a status, I have selected open for submission, and I have tick search. Like that, you will find our 4 topics under AFIF. Then, as it was explained before, why we have 4 topics? Because we have 2 topics under the general envelope and 2 topics under the cohesion envelope. And within each envelope, we have 1 topic dedicated to unit contribution and 1 topic dedicated to co-funding rates. So you just need to select the topic you are interested in, and you will find this website. Here, it is indicated all the relevant information of the topic, such as the topic description, the conditions, and the documents. Also, you have topic-related questions already published, and the submission IT tool. So I have highlighted there, as you see in orange, in yellow, and in green, the sections that we consider really important. For example, under the conditions and documents, you will find the call text, but also the list of implementing partners. Also in the start submission, you will be redirected to the submission tool, and the topic Q&A, this is where we will publish all the questions that we receive from applicants. So if you want to start a submission, you just click on the start submission and you will land in this web page. So no worries, in the previous one, there is only 1 option per topic, then you cannot mistake. You just tick that option and you push start submission. So here we are. Now we are in the electronic submission system. This is the IT tool to submit an application. You can see in the screen how this looks like. I have tried to highlight it in different colors, the important information that you can find and the different sections. Then, for example, in red, you see the call deadline, but also you see the days left until the call will be closed. In green, this is really important that you check because you see the topic you are applying and you need to make sure that this is the correct one that you want to. Then in yellow, you have the section where you have to download the documents and templates. These documents, then you will need to fill or complete them and then to re-upload in the system. And then in pink, you see what we call helpful, and I don't see really well the other word, but this is really, we really strongly recommend you to go and check all these links. Then on the right side, you see in blue the different sections that you need to fill in. For example, you need to fill in part A, first an application form that you need to fill in directly in the system, but also you need to edit the GIS button. And then you need to complete part B, that is mainly based on documents that you will upload. But we will go a bit more in detail in the next slide on that. So in the next slide, how to submit a complete application. We have included here a list to make sure that you don't forget any of that steps. So first, again, submit the application under the correct topic. Second, you need to encode all sections of application form part A directly in the electronic submission system. This is the administrative information about the participants and the summarized budget of the project. Then you also need to indicate the location of the action through the GIS data button. You also need to complete and upload application form part B. This is the technical description of the project, but please bear in mind that this is limited to maximum 120 pages, so any additional pages will be made invisible to the evaluators by the system. Then you will also need to complete and upload all mandatory annexes. And maybe 2 important things, please use the forms provided inside the electronic submission system. We say that because these forms are also available in the portal for information The ones you need to use are the ones inside this electronic submission system, and these forms and templates should not be modified. Maybe a word on the mandatory annexes and supporting documents. I will start saying that for more information, to make sure that you submit the correct documents, we advise you always to go to section 5 of the call text. Here I have indicated simply the list. All these documents are mandatory with some exceptions, then we'll go one by one. The first one is related to the budget. This is the detailed budget table per work package. For the co-funding rate proposals. For the unit contribution proposals, this budget table is called calculator. Then you need to provide always the financial approval letter, either from an IP or from other financial institution. Then the member state's letter of support. This is from each member state where the project is implemented. A timetable or a Gantt chart. You also need to provide the environmental compliance file. In this case, we advise you really to read the instruction inside the file, because depending on the type of project, you will need to fill in one way or the other way, and also to attach additional declarations. Then you will have to upload the simplified cost benefits analysis calculator. For proposals submitted with the support of an IP or under the unit contribution topic, this is not mandatory, but it's still strongly recommended to submit it. And then finally, the two last are the activity reports of last year and the list of previous projects. Again, this is a mandatory annexes, but for public organization, this is not mandatory. Next slide, please. So pay attention to the following things also before submitting. Proposals must be submitted electronically via the electronic submission system, meaning that paper or email submissions are not possible. Also, proposals must be complete, including all documents and mandatory annexes. Bear in mind that after closure, the application can no longer be edited. Proofread your proposal. Why? Because evaluators can only assess your proposal on the basis of provided information. No assumption will be made. And we also strongly recommend that you make sure that the key information is available in English in the application. And something obvious, but we still encounter some issues with that, then please complete your application sufficiently in advance to avoid any technical problems. Some useful information also that we receive a lot of questions about this, and so here I just put 3 points, but I have shared the links with more information on each of these subjects. Then the first one is all beneficiaries must be registered in the participant register and have a PIC number, what we call a participant identification code, before submitting an application. A PIC number is a 9-digit code and it's really easy to get it. It's a matter of 3-4 minutes and you get it. Then this is needed to draft your proposal. And first, also recommendation, check that you may already have one for your entity. To access a draft or submitted proposal. So you may start drafting a proposal or submitted it, and then you want to come back to that proposal, how to do it. You have 2 ways. The easiest one is to log into the funding and tenders portal and go to my proposal section. But so normally you should receive a notification when you draft a proposal, and you should be able also to access the proposal from there. And also on the access rights, who can edit a proposal? So the creator of a proposal becomes by default the coordinator. This person is the only one being able to grant access right to other participants. So the coordinator plus the participants of the coordinating organization with full access rights can edit all parts of the proposal. They can upload the technical annexes, and of course they can submit the proposals. However, the contacts of the other participating organization, they can only edit their participant data, and they can read the whole proposal, but they cannot submit or change the proposal. So now maybe a word on the questions that we will publish in the portal based on the questions we receive from you, either here during the info day or through our functional mailbox. We have two types of questions. This has been changed recently. Now we have what we call the topic-related questions and answers. These are questions related to the AFIF calls. These questions are published on the Q&A section of each topic page. I will provide you a screenshot in the next slides. And all questions start with AFIF. On the other hand, we will also have general safe transport FAQs. These questions relate to all safe transport calls and, of course, are applicable to AFIF calls. They will be published on the FAQ section of the Funding and Tenders portal, and all questions start with under safe transport calls. Then these start AFIF and under safe transport calls will help you to find them through the search tools. So in the next slide, you see the screenshots where to find the topic-related question and answers. This is the topic page on the left side, and you just click on the topic Q&A, and it redirects you, and you can see now some examples of questions. And in the next slide, you can see a screenshot where to find the FAQ, the General Safe Transport FAQ, that is the FAQ section of the portal. So as a last slide, I have included here really useful links where to find any kind of help you may need. So first, you have an online manual. This is a step-by-step online guidance. Then you have an IT how-to. This IT guidance with screenshots is released completely to the online manual, but it's with the screenshots. Then you have an FAQ, you have a repository of FAQ related to the submission of proposals process. I have included the link with this repository. Then, if you have call-related questions, you need to write to this functional mailbox. And if you have IT-related questions, what is IT-related questions? Is, for example, if you forget a password, if you have issues with access rights or technical issues, please, you need to contact the IT help desk directly. You have there the email and the phone number. And that's it. Then I will pass the floor to my colleague, Cristina.
Good afternoon, everyone. So what I will do is to give you an overview on the evaluation process and also our criteria of the AFIF call. And after that, I will give you also some tips that will help you prepare a good quality proposal. So starting with the evaluation process, this slide summarizes in a nutshell how it goes. It starts with a first step, the admissibility and eligibility checks. These checks are performed by CINEA colleagues, and what they are going to do is to verify that the proposals and the applicants, they comply with the admissibility and eligibility criteria established in the call. This process starts just once the cutoff date is reached, so it's just after each cutoff date. Once this process is completed, all the admissible and eligible proposals will follow to the next phase, which is the evaluation of proposals. And this phase is based on an individual assessment by the experts, and also on the agreement made by the experts in a consensus meeting in which they will agree in the scoring for each proposal. This is also an internal process, and after that will follow the internal evaluation panel. This is a meeting chaired by the European Commission in which the internal evaluation panel will propose the list of recommending for funding proposals to the selection committee. After the approval of the selection committee, the final step is to obtain the green light by the CEF committee. And it will be at this moment when the list of proposals recommended for funding will be made public, and also the grant agreement preparation phase will start, and also those applicants with rejected proposals will be informed. The full process that starts with the cutoff date and finalizes with the green light of the CEF committee lasts more or less around 4 months. Next slide, please. And here a slide that shows the 5 criteria established by the call text. So each of the proposals are going to be evaluated under these 5 criteria: priority and urgency, maturity, quality, impact, and catalytic effect. The scores, the minimum one is 0, that would be insufficient, and the maximum 5 points, that would be excellent, and the pass mark is 3. And a proposal, in order to be recommended for funding, needs to reach a 3 in each of the criteria. Otherwise, it will be rejected. Next, please. Now I would like to go into more details for each of the criterion, starting by priority and urgency. So what do we expect here is that the proposal addresses how it contributes to political objectives and priorities, like, for example, the Green Deal and the AFIF regulation. We expect also that the proposal explains how it contributes to the TEN-T network. The proposal should also explain how it is relevant to the work program and the context. There should be also a presentation about the EU added value of the proposal, and when it's applicable and there are synergies, this should also be explained here under this criterion. Synergies with CEF Energy or CEF Digital, or also with other EU funding programs. Second criterion is maturity, and here what we would like to know is if the project is ready to start on the starting date, and if it will be completed by the end date. We are going to look at the status of different administrative process, permitting, authorizations, procurement procedures. And another important element under this criterion is to assess the financial maturity of the proposal, and this means that we want to be sure that those sources of funding are covered other than CEF, of course. Next, please. The third criterion is the quality criterion. So here we look at the quality of the full application. We also look at the operational capacity of the applicants, if they have the competence and experience to perform the project. We look at the quality of the projects, and here this involves the implementation plan. On one side, the work packages, if they are logic and well structured, and also if the financial resources are well justified. We will look also at the organization structure of the project, at elements such as quality assurance, monitoring and control procedures. We look at the risk analysis and mitigation measures proposed, and the communication plan, in particular in what is relevant to give EU visibility. And finally, we look into what the proposal explains about the sustainability and maintenance strategy when applicable. The last two criterion. So impact, here we expect that you present a demand or traffic forecast study. There should also be an analysis of the socio-economic impact, and this should be substantiated by a simplified CBA analysis when this is required by the call. And this is required by the call when the proposal is coming with the support of a non-implementing partner. There will be a short presentation after my presentation about more details about the CBA analysis. In any case, also for the proposals that come with the support of an implementing partner, we expect in this section that there is a sum and comprehensive analysis of these impacts. Under the impact criterion, it should cover also any kind of environmental and climate impacts, also the climate resilience of the project, and other impacts such as congestion, safety and security, service quality, and noise emissions. There are other aspects to be also analyzed under this criterion. These are innovation and digitalization, safety and interoperability, and also the cross-border dimension of the project. And finally, catalytic effect. And here what we want to know is how the CEF funding is needed to implement the project, how it will facilitate or accelerate the project. And so we will look if the CEF funding will overcome the funding gap. That means it will turn the project in a financially viable project. This, again, as for impact, it should be substantiated by the simplified CBA analysis in the case of those proposals coming with the support of a non-implementing partner. Another aspect to be covered under this criterion is the leverage effect on additional investments, public or private, and also how CEF will contribute to commitment of stakeholders to this project. And this is all about our criteria. And now I will move into the helpful tips to prepare a good quality proposal. So, yeah, in this slide, basically, let's think that you have a good idea about the project proposal with the description is activities, tasks, expected results that will be implemented during a timeline and with a specific budget. So you have to think how to present this in a way that it fits with the call requirements. So it's important to read the call text. That is one of the main tips. And also that everything is explained under the different documents. And we know that there are many different documents, and sometimes the information needs to be displayed, the same information needs to be displayed under different sections. So you have to think also about the reader. So that means it's the experts. So it's important to be clear and concise and to avoid unnecessary complexities. And looking at the title of the slide, so one of the most important elements to take into consideration is to be coherent and consistent across documents. So, for example, you will have different budget tables and also a budget reflected in the financial approval letter. So it's important that everything makes sense and matches. And also, in terms of the timeline, you will have a Gantt chart showing milestones, but also in Part B, there will be different sections in which you will have to indicate due dates for deliverables and milestones, and everything needs to make sense. And finally, of course, you need to address the scoring criteria accordingly. So for this, it's recommended that you follow the instructions in the sections of Part B in the application form. Next, please. So I would like to illustrate the tips by highlighting some of the main issues that we identify in the proposals that were submitted in the previous AFIF call. The first one would be to find that the proposal, maybe not fully, but sometimes only some activities are out of scope. I illustrate this with an example of an infrastructure of e-methane for vessels that is not eligible under the AFIF call, so this would be out of scope, but also locations that are not along the TEN-T networks or urban nodes. Sometimes we also found that there are inconsistencies or it's not clear what is project proposal, what is the global project, so this should be also clear. There are some data that are reflected across different documents that sometimes are not consistent. And I give an example here, like the number of recharging points in the financial approval letter that is different from the application form Part B. Sometimes we find that there are insufficient details on technical requirements, and this is important because it's some of the elements to consider an activity eligible or not. I give some examples like the supply capacity for the hydrogen refueling stations, but also in a proposal for recharging points for heavy-duty vehicles, it's important to know if parking spaces are the proper ones to park the heavy-duty vehicles. And finally, we find that the scoring criteria have not been properly addressed or insufficiently addressed. Examples are, for example, that CEF funding is not, the need for CEF funding is not sufficiently substantiated. Next, please. And here I wanted to highlight some of the main issues identified in relation with the timeline and the tasks that are proposed for your project. So sometimes we see many inconsistencies. I already mentioned in the timing, in the Gantt chart. So you have on one side a supporting document to complete, which is the Gantt chart, and will reflect your work packages, tasks, and milestones. And on the other hand, you have also due days to be encoded in the different application forms, including the project duration. So I would like just to raise your attention on that. So everything makes sense and is coherent. And also to pay attention to the specificities of the call text. So the starting date and the project duration are in line with the call text. Sometimes we spotted that technical implementation is not realistic vis-a-vis the financial implementation. For example, there are key milestones at the end of the action, but on the other hand, the relevant budget is allocated at the start of the action. So this would be also an issue. And finally, work packages or tasks sometimes are not sufficiently explained, or there are insufficient number of milestones and deliverables. And there are some also work packages and tasks spotted that are non-eligible, and I will come later in another slide with the non-eligible activities. Next, please. Here I wanted also to make some remarks about the main issues that we have found related to the budget, and here I refer only to those proposals that are submitted under the co-funding topic, not the unit contribution. So one is related to the fact that the budget is not sufficiently detailed and that cost cannot be identified. And I indicate here one section in which you can justify the sources, the financial resources of the proposal, which is section 3.1 of Part B. We found also inconsistencies sometimes in the previous calls between the budget tables. I already mentioned this, so pay attention to put the same amounts in the budget table Part A, in Part B, and also that this is consistent with the project summary sheet of the financial approval letter. And just to highlight that in case of inconsistency, the one that prevails is the budget table in Part A. Sometimes we see that synergetic element costs are wrongly calculated or are embedded with infrastructure cost, and it was mentioned before by Richard that this should go under an independent work package with a maximum 20% of the project cost. And then we see that sometimes there are some non-eligible costs included in the proposals. And yeah, so linking with the previous slides, I would like to show this slide as a reminder of the non-eligible activities and costs under the AFIF goals. So basically, it's not eligible all horizontal costs like project management, communication, and dissemination. Preparatory activities such as studies, designs, land acquisition, permitting, procurement. Some administrative activities as well, such as traveling costs, or indirect cost. And then there are some also non-eligible activities that are related to activities that are funded by the CEF, by the AFIF goal. One is the recharging infrastructure upgrade, the recharging infrastructure in parking buildings, the hydrogen production facilities that are no renewable based, and the shore-based storage tanks for ammonia and methanol. Also, vehicles are not eligible except for vessels and transshipment equipment. And finally, all OPEs and staff costs are not eligible either. And my last slide is to show you the budget table in Part A. The objective is to help you to fill this table properly. So in green, you see the boxes in which we expect you to encode the cost. There is the cost, the column for the subcontracting cost, in which we will expect almost all costs, except for those synergetic elements that have their specific column, and also the specific column for the works in autonomous regions, because there is a specific co-funding rate for this type of works. You see also the columns that you should not fill in, because they refer to non-eligible costs, and then some additional columns in which we will not expect to have costs. And we will appreciate if you could round the budget to the closest 1,000 if possible. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to receiving good quality proposals.
Yes, good afternoon. So a few words on simplified cost-benefit analysis. So when we speak about this, what are we speaking about? So mainly it's about an Excel table, an Excel tool, whereby you will have to introduce a number of data, input data, so discount rate, but also, of course, the characteristics of your project in terms of the cost. When will you incur in a number of costs, typically to implement the stations, but also your operating costs along the lifetime of the equipment, and then the revenues, so what you will get, for example, on a station from selling electricity, and also about externalities, so the positive effect on being it social, economic, environmental, etc. So with all this input data, the tool will compute 4 outputs, and then we will use this output in the analysis. So basically, we will use it under 2 criteria, or mainly under 2 criteria. First of all, under impact, we will simply ask the question whether the society will be better with the project or without it. And there we will use, in particular, the economic net present value, whereby where it should be positive. If it is not, the theory says that the society would be better without it. And of course, you will have to detail it a bit more. And then we use also this data to assess the catalytic effect, mainly to see whether the project really need a grant or public support for being it implemented. So mainly we look at the financial net present value, and if it is positive, the theory says that in principle the project will be financially viable because the revenues will compensate quickly your initial cost for the investment. And there is a question mark as regards the real need of a grant or for public support. If you can go to the next slide. So this is a bit, in a nutshell, what I was explaining. We see if the project is economically viable. So if it is not, it means that the society, in theory, is better without this project. So we have a case for rejection. And if we are in this situation, you have to explain in your application form why we are in a situation whereby the indicator tells us that the project is not economically viable, so that the society should be better without it, and that you believe that it is not the case, but it's, I would say, very rare case. What happens more often is that we see that the project is very quickly profitable, and therefore you do not apparently need a CEF grant or any public support for being implemented, because the revenue will in fact offset very quickly your initial investment cost and also the operating cost. So in this case, if you have a financial net present value that is positive, you need also to explain very clearly why, in spite of this apparently very positive economic case for you as beneficiary, you still need on top a grant. Then, very importantly, you do not need to submit the simplified cost-benefit analysis if your project is submitted with the support of an implementing partner, because the implementing partner have already looked at the economic of it. And also you do not need to submit a simplified cost-benefit analysis if your project is under unit contribution, because there also the threshold for the unit contribution is calibrated in a way that the support is targeted to focus on the need, so we do not need really the CBA. Nevertheless, you can still do it because it's an element that can also support your argumentation. In particular, it may support your case under impact, and also under catalytic effect. It can be a useful element demonstrated that you need a grant really to implement the action. CBA is sometimes also used to assess the financial maturity, in particular where the financial gap remains even with the grant. Then we will look a bit more to be sure that there is no doubt that the project will be implemented, that you have the financing, and that you will come with the financing package that will be sound to implement the project. And this is it for the simplified cost benefit analysis, I think.
Thank you, Christian. So maybe we can continue with taking on board some of the questions that were pending. Sometimes from the beginning we cannot take them all. We have a large bunch of questions, but we'll try to reply to some of them at least. So let's try to give a reply to some questions for all the sessions that you attended today. First, very practical one: are we receiving this presentation after the session? Well, it will be made available on our website. So there will be this has been recorded, so you will have the presentation available on the website, maybe on PDF as well. Yes, tomorrow. So tomorrow, both the video recording and the PDF will be available. Can you combine the AFIF support with local or national support for the same project? Yes, actually, you can combine AFIF support with national and local support, where we have. We have actually two cases where it's not possible. The first case is to combine with other European Union support programs. So you cannot combine two co-fundings coming from a European program. Second case is with the Recovery and Resilience Facility, where you cannot combine funding for the same project coming at national level from the Resilience and Recovery Facility with AFIF. So this has been clarified. What's the difference between general envelope and cohesion envelope topics? Well, basically, it relates to which member states, in which member states you will deploy your infrastructure. Cohesion envelope are member states mostly on the eastern part, to make it very simple, of Europe. But yeah.
I can maybe elaborate on this. So for cohesion countries, which for the current multi-annual financial period are, and I will just read them out, Bulgaria, Czechia, Estonia, Greece, Croatia, Cyprus, Latvia, Lithuania, Hungary, Malta, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia. These are the cohesion countries, and if you have a project in those countries, you apply to the cohesion envelope. And then there are national specificities, of course, so you will have to check with the national administration, because they will also have to support your project
application. Yeah. Okay. If the investment will be carried out by a SPV, a special purpose vehicle, do you advise to build the application with the SPV, even if it has not been recorded yet, not created yet? Well, basically, we are quite flexible on that. Ever you have an SPV which is existing and you apply with the SPV, which will incur costs, which will own the infrastructure in their assets account. Sorry, or the SPV has not been created, and we can, once created, make an amendment to the grant agreement to include the SPV which has been created. So we have some flexibility on that.
Maybe I can just clarify on the cohesion and general envelope that, of course, when you're from a cohesion country, you will be able to apply in the general envelope. Whereas when you are a general envelope country, you will not be able to apply under the cohesion envelope. So just to make that clear, that basically for cohesion countries, they have access to both. envelopes, and the general envelope countries have access only to the general envelope, but not saying anything about the national specificities, of course, because you will need support from the national administration. So there might be some, let's say, policy priorities where applications to AFIF should only be done on the general envelope, for example.
So check with the national authorities that have to support your application to see if your project may be eligible, let's say, or if the national authorities are willing to support your project through the cohesion envelope, which benefits from the higher support rate or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, do you have to be one of? Is the project has to be located on one of the 9 corridors to apply? No, I mean it's always an asset to be on one of the 9 corridors, of course, because we want those corridors, multimodal corridors, to be green as well. But no, it's not a requirement. It's more an additional element. Is the unit contribution for 350 kilowatt recharging stations applies also to light duty vehicles recharging stations? Well, to make it very clear, if you want to deploy recharging points for light duty vehicles, the minimum is 150. It can be more than that, so it can be 350, but you will still receive the unit contribution for 150. 350 kilowatt is only for heavy duty vehicles.
And in this context, again, there is a map for the light duty vehicles, which is the 150 kilowatt, and there's a map for the heavy duty vehicles. So there you will have to check which is the 350 kilowatt. So there you will have to check the eligible sections, apart from the unit contribution that applies, but you will have to check for the eligible sections for light duty or heavy duty vehicles.
Can you explain the division of budget to be implemented by implementing partner and a public-private financial institution? So the rule remains the same as in the previous call. You need to receive at least 10% of your budget as financing from a financial institution. So again, either an implementing partner or a commercial bank. So 10% of support, financial support, is the minimum from your financial institution.
Maybe I can add here, as we said before, there's 2/3 of the budget is reserved, I want to say, for projects that come with an implementing partner. 1/3 of the budget is reserved for projects that come with a non-implementing partner, but this is not, let's say, it's the idea that we have, and that's the idea how we would like to distribute the budget. But in the end, what is important that we will provide successful projects with our funding. So it's what I want to say is that it's not a very strict division to the end. Yeah,
it's fungible.
But we will be able to reshuffle the budget depending on how
the actual number of applications and amounts that are requested on the two different under the two different headings. Is the TEN-TEC interactive map viewer including current data on the eligible roads map for this call? Yes, and I would say actually that the TEN-TEC viewer is even based on the new TEN-T network.
Yeah.
So it includes all the new sections that have been included in the revised TEN-T network. So next question. You said that vehicles are not eligible. What about ground support equipment vehicles at airports? Vehicles are not eligible. What we provide at airports is electrification of ground handling services, meaning that we provide the infrastructure to support the installation of ground power units, of air conditioning units. So everything which relates to the supply and not to the vehicles. A question on FNPV. You want to take it, Christian, or I do it?
Mm-hmm. No, I can do it.
Yeah.
So first of all, it is not that a project with a positive FNPV will be systematically rejected. It only means that if FNPV is positive, the theory tells us that in fact the revenues of the project will compensate by far the initial cost and the operational cost. Then there is a question, if such a project is profitable per se, why is a CEF grant needed for the implementation? So we will look really at what the applicant is giving as additional explanation under the catalytic effect criteria. So here it's very important to be very clear and explain why this project that apparently is financially viable without CEF support still needs CEF support to be implemented. So it's not that it will be rejected. It means that you will need to make an extra effort to explain why CEF funding is needed to implement this project.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Other questions? I mean, is the support for bunker barges or vessels limited to CapEx support, or does it also include and cover OpEx support? Well, it's very clear that for any of the projects that we are financing, OpEx is not an eligible cost. Which actions can be undertaken before cut-off date? Can an operator have started already work? Well, it's kind of a tricky question because there are two sides to the coin. First, you need to be relatively mature. So we consider that the project can be implemented within the time frame of maximum 39 months. So it's very important to demonstrate the maturity of your project. But at the same time, if it's too mature and you already started the work, we may question the need for CEF funding. So preliminary works may have started. A project may be ongoing for some parts, and you have not yet taken the final investment decision. Up to you, I would say, up to the project promoters to demonstrate that you are sufficiently mature, but still to take the decision to invest properly in the infrastructure, you still need a financial support to cover the funding gap, for example. Can you confirm that the implementing partner does have to cover 10% of the cost of project? Yes, I replied previously. Indeed, it's minimum 10%. It may be more, of course, but it's minimum 10% in various forms. It may be a loan, it may be equity or semi-equity. It may be even a committed credit line. So there are many possibilities to cover as 10% minimum. Yes. Alors, the definition of outermost regions. We can provide you the list of outermost regions that are eligible. And then, of course, you will have to look at the maps to see if it's on the TEN-T network, if it's the core network, the comprehensive network, if it belongs to basically the location that could be eligible.
So the 9 outermost regions of the European Union are Guadeloupe, French Guiana, Réunion, Martinique, Mayotte, and Saint-Martin for France, the Azores and Madeira for Portugal, and the Canary Islands for Spain.
Okay. Regarding the maritime vessels, the developer of a recharging station, should it be the same that the operator building or retrofitting a vessel? No, there is no such requirement. I mean, you may have a consortium of several partners, one dealing with the supply, with the infrastructure, and the other one with the vessels. The important point is really that the project in itself is really consistent, meaning that it has at the same time the supply side and the demand side. And that's the only reason why we are financing vessels, is that we want to support the initial start, the kickoff of the use of this infrastructure by providing a demand and making sure that there is a demand at the same time. So it goes together, but it may be led by different partners. Where can we find regulation or appropriate measurements of parking space for HDV? Well, first, for HDV, rules may be relating to the locations as well where it's implemented. If it's in a petrol station, along an highway, in a commercial or industrial area, you may have various rules at national level. So I invite you to first check at national level what are the requirements that could apply. What's for sure is that if you apply for deploying recharging stations for both light-duty vehicles and heavy-duty vehicles, the areas dedicated to those two type of vehicles have to be clearly separated. I mean, there is no mix between HDVs and LDV in terms of traffic for obvious security reasons, but this has to be very clear in your proposal. Do you confirm that hydrogen refueling stations for public transport which are on the TEN-T network but not in urban nodes are not eligible, and why? Well, what we are financing here is essentially the greening of public transportation in urban nodes, simply. And you will see that what we expect basically is, even though it's not yet compulsory, is that sustainable urban mobility plans are somehow on their way, or there is already some actions in this regard. So the SUMPs, it's not compulsory again, but this is highly appreciated if you have a project dedicated on an urban node where we have such sustainable urban mobility plans that are available or could be available in the near future. And that the deployment of your infrastructure is in line, basically, with this. Evaluation in case the proposal is rejected, inadmissibility, but send claim, redress, which is accepted, is the proposal evaluated together with other proposals. Well, you have a possibility, of course, to claim if you think that there was a maladministration or a mistake. But clearly, for admissibility reasons, it's something which is really straightforward. So if your proposal is rejected for admissibility reasons, it's very unlikely that you may have a successful redress. But, okay, errors are always possible. So, of course, if ever the evaluation has started and your claim is accepted because there was a mistake again, then we proceed with the evaluation, clearly. Can you start ordering charging station? Can you start ordering charging station, but not mentioning the exact location before the start of the project? Yes, I mean, we understand that in particular for deployment of charging stations, the exact location may not be completely secured yet for various reasons. So we accept that this may change. So what is required is that at least you send a list of all the stations, all geographical coordinates of the stations you intend to deploy. And so the charging station, the number of charging station of charging points you intend to deploy in those stations. But really, this is rather flexible, and we can accept some changes. Yeah. And that's it, I think. No questions? Okay. Okay, yes, 2 points before we close the session. Before we close the session, important points indeed. The eligibility of cost. Costs are eligible as from your application date. So you have a cutoff date, but nobody prevents you to submit before. So if you submit before, the cost will be eligible as from the application date. As for the duration of a project, we count 39 months duration maximum as from the cutoff date. Well, I think there's 2 clarifications maybe useful, and we had some questions on this. As there are no more questions at the moment. No. So, of course, you have a FAQ section which is accessible, and you saw this during the presentation. So feel free to send questions on points that were not sufficiently clear today. Again, the video recording will be available as from tomorrow, as well as the PDF. So having said that, I think we can close the session, and wishing you a great success in the application process. And yes, there is a survey, so it's only 3-4 questions, I think. So it's not a long survey. It will take you 3 minutes. So 3-4 questions. Please complete the survey. It will help improving whenever needed this type of presentation. Yeah. So I close. Good luck and good success in your future applications. Bye.